The land west of the Red Willow Cut didn't forgive mistakes. It was open country, flat stretches broken only by low hills and wind-bent grass that turned brown by midsummer. A man could stand on his porch and see for miles without spotting another soul. That's how Caleb Morrow preferred it. His ranch sat alone against the horizon. One main house with weathered boards and a porch that sagged on the south corner. A small barn that held more dust than hay. 50 head of cattle, maybe 60 on a good year, enough to keep him fed and working, but never enough to make him wealthy. He didn't mind. Wealth brought attention, and attention brought complications he'd learned to live without. Caleb's days followed the same pattern. He woke before the sun broke over the eastern plains, lit the stove, brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint. By the time the first light touched the fence line, he was already checking water troughs or mending whatever the night had damaged. The work never ended, but it had a rhythm he understood. Cattle needed feeding. Fences needed walking. The barn roof leaked when it rained, and the well pump fought him every other week. He didn't speak much. There was no one to speak to. The nearest town was a half-day's ride, and he made the trip only when supplies ran low or when a cow needed selling. The people there knew his face but not his story, and that suited him fine. He'd nod at the general store clerk, pay in cash, and leave before anyone thought to ask questions. Isolation wasn't loneliness to Caleb. It was protection. He'd known people once, family, friends, a woman he'd planned to marry. But loss had a way of teaching hard lessons. People left, or they died, or they disappointed you in ways that cut deeper than any Kansas winter. After enough of that, a man learned to keep his world small. Predictable. Safe. The ranch reflected that philosophy. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted. The house had one bedroom, a kitchen, and a spare room he used for storage. He kept his rifle clean and his pantry stocked. He knew where every tool belonged and every weak board in the barn. Control came from knowing your land and asking nothing of it you couldn't provide yourself. Evenings were the quietest. After the work was done, Caleb would sit on the porch with coffee gone cold in his cup, watching the sun sink red and orange behind the hills. The silence out there wasn't empty, it was full of wind and distant cattle and the creak of wood settling. He'd listen to it all, letting the day drain out of his bones, and feel something close to peace. He didn't think about what was missing. Thinking led to wanting, and wanting led to disappointment. Better to accept what was. A man alone on a modest ranch, working land that would never make him rich but would never betray him either. That was enough. The seasons turned. Spring brought rain and mud. Summer baked the grass to straw. Fall meant roundups and repairs before winter came howling down from the north. Caleb moved through it all with the steady patience of someone who'd stopped expecting surprises. But the land had a way of humbling assumptions. Late spring storms in that country came fast and mean. One evening the sky had been clear. By nightfall, clouds were piling up black and low, and the wind carried the smell of rain and electricity. Caleb knew the signs. He pulled on his coat, grabbed a lantern, and headed for the north fence line. Cattle spooked in weather like this, and a broken fence meant hours of tracking strays come morning. He didn't expect to find anything except broken wire and frightened livestock. He was wrong. The storm hit like a fist. Rain came sideways, cold and hard enough to sting exposed skin. The wind howled across the open ground, bending the grass flat and turning Caleb's lantern into a useless flicker. He kept his head down and pushed forward, following the fence line by memory more than sight. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to feel in his chest. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines, throwing everything into sharp relief for half a second before plunging it back into darkness. The cattle were somewhere to the west, lowing nervously. Caleb could hear them between thunderclaps, but they sounded contained. The fence was probably holding. Then he heard something else. A voice. Thin and high, nearly swallowed by the wind. He stopped, straining to hear past the rain drumming against his hat. There it was again, a shout, or maybe a cry. Humans. Desperate. Caleb turned toward the sound, lifting his lantern though it barely cut through the downpour. He moved carefully, boots sinking into mud with each step. The voice came from the direction of the dry arroyo, a crack in the earth that ran east to west about a quarter mile from his property line. In good weather, it was nothing. In a storm like this, it could fill fast and mean. Lightning flashed again. In that brief moment of light, he saw her. A woman crouched beneath a scrub oak that offered almost no shelter. Her dress was plastered to her body, dark with rain. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and she was shaking, from cold or fear, Caleb couldn't tell. Maybe both. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am," he called over the wind. "You hurt?" She looked up. Her face was pale, streaked with rain and mud. Her eyes were wide, searching his face for something, threat or safety, he wasn't sure which. She didn't answer, just stared. Caleb kept his voice steady. "The storm's getting worse. You can't stay out here." She flinched when thunder cracked again, pressing herself tighter against the tree. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Or maybe the wind just took it. He didn't waste time with more questions. He shrugged off his heavy coat and stepped closer, moving deliberately so she could see his hands. When she didn't bolt, he draped the coat over her shoulders. She grabbed it with trembling fingers and pulled it close. "My ranch is just north of here," he said. "You can wait out the storm there. It's dry. It's safe." She looked at him for a long moment, water running down her face. Then she nodded, just barely. Caleb brought his horse around, a sturdy roan gelding that didn't spook easy. He helped the woman up into the saddle, keeping his grip firm but not tight. She was light, too light, and when his hand brushed her arm, he felt her wince. In the next flash of lightning, he caught sight of dark marks on her wrists. Bruises, old and new. He didn't comment. He just took the reins and started walking, leading the horse back toward the ranch. The woman swayed in the saddle but didn't fall. She didn't speak. Caleb didn't push her to. The rain didn't let up. By the time they reached the house, both of them were soaked clean through. Caleb tied the horse under the barn's overhang and guided the woman onto the porch. She stood there, dripping and silent, staring at the door like it might disappear. "Go on inside," Caleb said quietly. "I'll get a fire going." She hesitated, then stepped across the threshold. Caleb followed, closing the door against the storm. The house fell quiet except for the rain hammering the roof. Whatever had brought her here, it wasn't good. That much he knew. Caleb got the fire going while the woman stood dripping on the floorboards. She hadn't moved from where he'd left her, just inside the door, still wrapped in his soaked coat. Her eyes tracked his movements, sharp, watchful, like an animal deciding whether to run. He didn't look at her directly. That seemed to help. He kept his movements slow and predictable, adding wood to the stove, lighting the kindling, adjusting the damper. When the flames caught and began to warm the room, he finally spoke. "Spare rooms through there," he said, nodding toward the narrow hallway. "Clean blankets on the bed. You can get out of those wet clothes." She didn't move. Caleb crossed to the kitchen, keeping distance between them. He pulled a towel from the drawer and set it on the table, then filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove. "I'll leave dry clothes outside the door. They'll be big, but they're warm." Still nothing. Just those watchful eyes. He left the room without waiting for a response. In his own bedroom, he dug through the old trunk at the foot of his bed and found a flannel shirt and a pair of work trousers with a drawstring. They'd swallow her whole, but they were better than wet cotton. He brought them to the spare room door, knocked once, and set them on the floor. Then he went back to the kitchen and waited. It took several minutes before he heard the spare room door creak open. Soft footsteps. The clothes disappeared from the hallway. The door closed again, and he heard the scrape of something heavy being pushed against it from the inside. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She was scared. Badly. And she had reason to be. He could see that much in the bruises, in the way she moved, in the fact that she'd been out in a storm with no horse and no coat. Someone had hurt her. Maybe someone was still looking for her. He made coffee and put together a simple meal, bread, butter, some cold beef from yesterday's dinner. He set it on a plate and left it outside her door with a cup of coffee. He knocked once, then retreated to the front room. The storm raged on through the night. Caleb sat in his chair by the fire, listening to the wind tear at the roof and the rain pound the windows. He didn't try to sleep. He wasn't sure the woman would stay if she woke up and found him unconscious. Trust took time, and time meant staying predictable. Around midnight, he heard her door open slightly. The plate scraped against the floor as she pulled it inside. The door closed again. He heard nothing else, but at least she was eating. Morning came gray and wet. The storm had passed, leaving everything mud-slicked and dripping. Caleb rose stiffly from his chair, rekindled the fire, and started breakfast. Eggs, biscuits, coffee. He made enough for two and set a plate outside her door the same as before. This time, the door opened while he was still in the hallway. She stood there in his oversized clothes, sleeves rolled up to expose thin wrists and those dark bruises. Her hair was damp and tangled. Her face was hollow with exhaustion, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been the night before. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome to stay until you figure out where you're headed." She looked down at the plate in her hands. "I don't have anywhere to go." "Then stay until you do." It wasn't charity, exactly. It wasn't kindness either, not the way most people meant it. It was just the truth. She needed shelter. He had it. The math was simple. She took the plate and retreated back into the room, but this time she didn't push anything against the door. It was a start. The woman's name was Mara Holt. Caleb learned that 3 days after she'd arrived, when she finally spoke more than a handful of words at a time. She told him while standing in the kitchen doorway, watching him wash dishes. She didn't offer more than the name, and he didn't ask. She moved through the house like a shadow those first days, quiet, careful, always keeping space between herself and him. She startled at sudden noises. A pot clanging against the stove. The barn door swinging shut in the wind. Thunder, even distant, made her go rigid and pale. Caleb adjusted without discussing it. He moved slower, made noise before entering rooms, kept his voice low and even. He established routines and stuck to them. Breakfast at dawn. Lunch at noon. Dinner when the sun touched the hills. He worked outside during the day, came in only for meals and evening chores. Predictability, he'd learned, was its own kind of safety. Mara stayed in a spare room mostly, but gradually she began to emerge. First just to eat at the table instead of taking food back to her room. Then to wash her own dishes. Then to stand on the porch in the early morning, watching the sun rise over the plains. Caleb watched her breathing change over those weeks. The shallow, quick rhythm of someone always braced for violence slowly deepened into something steadier. She started sleeping through the night. He could tell because the floorboards in her room stopped creaking at all hours. One morning, he found her in the chicken coop, gathering eggs. She'd let herself out quietly, done the work, and was heading back with a basket when he came out of the barn. "Didn't mean to step on your routine," she said quickly. "I just thought." "It's fine," Caleb said. helps, actually. After that, she found more to do. She mended a shirt he'd been meaning to fix for months. Swept the porch. Kept the kitchen cleaner than it had been in years. The work seemed to steady her, giving her hands something to do besides shake. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it mattered. One evening, while Caleb repaired a harness on the porch and Mara shelled beans in the chair beside him, she told him pieces of her story. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just facts, stated plainly, like she was reporting weather. She'd grown up with relatives who saw her as labor, nothing more. Passed between households when they needed extra hands. An uncle's farm. A cousin's ranch. A brother-in-law's store. She cooked, cleaned, worked livestock, mended clothes, whatever was required. When she resisted or complained, they reminded her she had nowhere else to go. No parents. No inheritance. No prospects. They said I owed them, Mara said, her hand steady on the beans. For raising me. For feeding me. Like I was borrowing property they had a right to collect on. Caleb kept his eyes on the leather he was stitching. Why did you run? Partly. Her voice went quieter. My cousin's husband decided I owed him other things too. Caleb's hand stopped moving. He didn't look up, didn't speak. Just wait. I told my cousin, Mara continued. She said I was lying. Said I was trying to cause trouble. They locked me in the cellar for 2 days to think about what I'd done. When they let me out, I waited until everyone was asleep, took what I could carry, and left. Made it maybe 10 miles before the storm hit. She paused, staring out at the fading light. I don't have anything, Mr. Morrow. No money. No land. Nothing anyone would consider worth defending. Caleb tied off the stitch and set the harness aside. He looked at her then, directly. You don't need to be worth something to have the right to choose where you are. Mara met his eyes. Hers were damp, but she didn't cry. You can stay here as long as you want, Caleb said. Nobody's going to force you to leave. She nodded slowly, and something in her face eased, just slightly, but enough to notice. The weeks turned over quietly. Spring deepened into early summer, and the work multiplied with it. Caleb spent long days mending fences, moving cattle to better grazing, checking the irrigation ditches he'd dug years ago. Mara worked alongside him when she could, holding posts steady while he hammered, fetching tools, learning the rhythm of ranch work. She grew stronger. The hollowness left her face. Her hands, which had trembled those first days, became steady and sure. She learned to anticipate what needed doing and did it without being asked. Not out of obligation, Caleb noticed, but because the work gave her something his words couldn't, proof that she belonged here, that her presence had value beyond what anyone could take from her. They fell into an easy partnership. Caleb would wake to find coffee already brewing, biscuits in the oven. Mara would come back from checking the chickens to discover the firewood stacked, the water hauled. They moved around each other with practiced efficiency, two people learning to share space without crowding it. The conversations grew longer. More honest. One afternoon, while they sat on the porch shelling peas, Mara said something that had clearly been building for a while. I don't want to be saved, she said, not looking at him. I know that's what this looks like. Helpless woman, decent man, rescue story. But that's not what I want. Caleb shelled another pea pod, waiting. I want to choose, Mara continued. Her voice was firm now, stronger than he'd heard it before. I want to stay somewhere because I'm wanted, not because I'm useful or because someone thinks they're doing charity. I want to build something that's mine, or ours, if that's how it works, but something I chose to build. Something no one can take away by saying I owe them. She finally turned to look at him. Does that make sense? It does, Caleb said simply. I don't need protection, Mara added. I don't need someone to fight my battles or tell me what's best for me. I just need a place where the choice is actually mine. Caleb nodded slowly. He understood that more than she probably knew. He'd built this ranch the same way, not for wealth or status, but for the freedom to decide his own days, to answer to no one. It was why he'd chosen isolation in the first place. Then stay, he said. Not because you owe me, and not because I'm trying to save you. Stay because you want to. Leave when you don't. It's your choice, Mara. Every day, it's your choice. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for doubt or hidden conditions. She didn't find any. All right, she said quietly. Then I'm staying. It felt like a promise, though neither of them said so out loud. The days continued, warmer now, longer. They worked side by side, building trust the only way Caleb knew how, through action, through consistency, through the quiet demonstration that words meant what they said. Mara stopped flinching at sudden movements. She laughed once, a startled sound that surprised them both, when one of the chickens escaped and led them on a ridiculous chase through the yard. Caleb found himself talking more, sharing thoughts he usually kept locked away. Plans for expanding the herd. Memories of how he'd built the barn, nearly killing himself in the process. Small observations about the land, the weather, the way the light changed as summer approached. Mara listened, and she offered her own thoughts in return. Practical ideas about the garden, suggestions for organizing the storage shed, questions about cattle that showed she was learning, thinking ahead. It felt like building something, though Caleb couldn't have named exactly what. But then, one morning in late June, a wagon appeared on the horizon. Caleb saw it first. He was in the yard, replacing a broken axle on the feed cart, when he caught the movement. He straightened slowly, shading his eyes against the sun. 3 people. 2 men and a woman. Coming directly toward the ranch. Mara stepped out of the house, saw his posture, and followed his gaze. The color drained from her face. That's them, she said. The wagon rolled into the yard and stopped. Dust settled around the wheels. The 2 men climbed down first, one older, thick through the chest with a gray beard, the other younger and lean with cold eyes. The woman stayed seated, her face pinched and righteous beneath a dark bonnet. Caleb stood where he was, tool still in hand. He didn't move toward them, didn't invite them closer. Just wait. The older man spoke first. We're here for Mara Holt. She's kind, and she's coming home. Mara had moved onto the porch, standing with her arms wrapped around herself. Not hiding, but not approaching either. Caleb could feel her fear without turning around, it was in the air between them, sharp and familiar. Miss Holt is a guest here, Caleb said evenly. She's free to come and go as she pleases. The younger man snorted. Guest. That's what we're calling it now. Watch your mouth, Caleb said, his voice dropping. You'll speak respectfully or you'll leave. The woman in the wagon leaned forward. She's family. She has obligations. She ran off in the middle of the night, stole food and supplies, and caused nothing but trouble and worry. She's coming back to make it right. I didn't steal anything, Mara said from the porch. Her voice shook, but she pushed the words out anyway. I took what was mine. Clothes I mended myself, food I cooked, money I earned from. You earned nothing, the older man cut her off. Everything you had came from us. We fed you, sheltered you, taught you work. You owe us, girl. You owe us years. I owe you nothing, Mara said, louder now. The younger man took a step forward. Caleb moved to block him, not threatening, just present. The man stopped, but his jaw worked with anger. She's coming with us, the older man said to Caleb. You got no legal right to keep her. I'm not keeping her, Caleb replied calmly. She's choosing to stay. There's a difference. Choosing, the woman spat. You've filled her head with ideas. Made her think she's something she's not. She's a girl with no prospects and no sense, and you're taking advantage. Caleb felt the insult roll off him. He'd been called worse by better people. Miss Holt is an adult. She makes her own decisions. Not according to the law, the older man said. She's got debts. Unpaid labor. Food and shelter going back years. We have a right to collect. Then take it to a judge, Caleb said. The younger man's lip curled. Maybe we don't need a judge. Maybe we just take what's ours and be done with it. The threat hung in the air. Caleb didn't reach for the rifle he kept by the door. Didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, solid and unmoved, his eyes locked on the younger man. You can try, Caleb said quietly. But you'll leave here with nothing but trouble. The older man studied Caleb for a long moment, measuring him. Then he looked past him to Mara. What do you want? Living out here with some stranger, pretending you're better than what you are. Mara stepped forward to the edge of the porch. Caleb could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, but when she spoke her voice didn't break. I'm not pretending anything, she said. I'm staying here because I choose to. Because Mr. Morrow treats me like a person, not property. You can't make me go back. The woman in the wagon laughed bitterly. We'll see about that. We'll be back, Mara. With the sheriff, with papers, with whatever it takes. You think you can just walk away from your family? From responsibility? You're ours, girl. You always have been. The older man climbed back onto the wagon. The younger one followed, though he kept his eyes on Caleb with open hostility. This ain't over, the older man said. The wagon turned and rolled back down the road, leaving ruts in the mud and a sick weight in the air. Caleb watched them until they disappeared. Then he turned to Mara. She was pale, shaking, but still standing. You all right? She nodded, though tears were streaming down her face. They'll come back. I know. That night, Caleb and Mara sat at the kitchen table long after the dishes were cleared. A single lamp burned between them, casting unsteady shadows on the walls. Outside, the world was dark and quiet, but neither of them felt at ease. They meant what they said, Mara finally spoke. They'll come back with the sheriff or a judge or just more men. They won't let this go. Caleb nodded. He'd known men like that, men who saw any loss of control as a personal insult, who'd spend more on revenge than they'd ever lost in the first place. Pride made them dangerous. The law might side with them, he admitted. Depends on the judge, depends on what story they tell. Some places still treat family claims seriously, especially when there's talk of debts or obligations. Mara's hands were folded tightly on the table. So I have to go back. No, Caleb said firmly. That's not what I'm saying. She looked up at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. There's another option, Caleb continued. He'd been thinking about it all evening, weighing the risks, considering what it would mean. I have contacts south of here, down in Cimarron County. Different jurisdiction, different officials. Land's rough, but it's workable. No one down there knows you or your kin. No one knows me either, not really. Mara was quiet, processing. We could start over, Caleb said. Leave before they come back. Take what we can carry, sell the rest. Find a piece of land where nobody's looking for you, where you can build something new without that shadow hanging over it. You'd leave your ranch? Mara asked. This place you built? Caleb looked around the kitchen, the worn table, the stove he'd repaired a dozen times, the walls that had sheltered him through hard years. It wasn't much, but it was his. Or it had been. This place kept me alive, he said slowly. But staying here means fighting a battle we might not win. And even if we do win, they'll keep coming back. Your family, or people like them. It'll never be peaceful. He met her eyes across the table. I'd rather leave and build something new than stay and watch them tear you down. Mara's throat worked. That's a lot to give up. So is your freedom, Caleb replied. Besides, it's just land and boards. What matters is the choice, yours and mine. If we stay, we're choosing to fight. If we go, we're choosing to build. Either way, it's our decision. Mara was silent for a long time. The lamp flame flickered, and somewhere outside a coyote called across the empty plains. I don't want you to sacrifice everything for me, she said quietly. I'm not, Caleb said. I'm choosing what kind of life I want. Turns out, it's one where you're in it. If that means starting over, then that's what I'll do. It wasn't a declaration of love, not the way songs and stories made it sound. It was simpler than that, and maybe more honest. Two people deciding that the life they could build together mattered more than the one they'd leave behind. Mara wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. When would we leave? Soon as possible. Before they come back. Tomorrow night, maybe. Give us time to pack, sell off what we can to the neighbors. And when we get there. We work, Caleb said. Same as here. We find land, build shelter, plant what we can. It won't be easy. Easy doesn't matter, Mara said. She reached across the table, and Caleb took her hand. Her grip was firm, certain. As long as it's ours. It will be, Caleb promised. They spent the next day preparing. Caleb rode to the nearest neighbor and sold his cattle for less than they were worth, but cash in hand. Mara packed their belongings, clothes, tools, seeds, supplies. Everything that could be carried or traded. Everything else would stay behind. By nightfall, they were ready. The wagon was loaded, the house locked. Caleb took one last look at the ranch in the moonlight, then climbed up beside Mara. Ready? He asked. She nodded. Let's go. They left before dawn, heading south into an uncertain country. The journey south took nearly 2 weeks. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads and larger towns where Mara's relatives might have sent word ahead. The land grew rougher as they went, drier, rockier, less forgiving. But it was also emptier, which meant safer. When they finally reached Cimarron County, Caleb found a contact he'd mentioned, a former ranch hand who knew land available for claim. It was raw territory, nothing on it but grass and stone and possibility. No house, no barn, no fences. Just open ground stretching toward distant mesas. It's a lot of work, the man said, squinting at Mara, then at Caleb. You two up for it? We are, Mara answered before Caleb could speak. They bought the land with what money they had and started building the next day. Everything came slowly. They lived in the wagon for weeks while Caleb framed a small house and Mara hauled water from the creek a mile away. Every board was measured and cut by hand. Every nail was precious. They worked from first light until they couldn't see anymore, then collapsed into exhausted sleep and rose to do it again. The work was brutal, but it was theirs. No one told them what to build or how to do it. No one claimed ownership of their labor. Every post they sunk into the ground was a choice they'd made together. Trust deepened in those months of shared hardship. When Caleb's back seized up from lifting beams, Mara rubbed liniment into the muscles without being asked. When Mara's hands blistered and bled from rope work, Caleb bandaged them carefully and took over her tasks until they healed. They learned each other's limits and strengths, learned when to push and when to rest. Affection grew quietly between them, not announced but evident in small gestures. The way Caleb made sure Mara ate before he did. The way Mara mended his shirts with more care than necessary. The way they sat together in the evenings, watching the sun set over land they were shaping with their own hands, and felt something neither of them could quite name but both recognized as important. They married in the fall. No ceremony, no preacher. They simply decided one evening that the commitment they'd already made through work and trust deserved a name. Caleb rode to town and filed the papers. When he came back, Mara had cooked a better dinner than usual, and they ate it together as husband and wife. It was practical. It was mutual. It was chosen. The ranch took shape through that first year and into the next. Fences went up. Cattle were purchased, just a small herd to start. Mara planted a garden that actually produced food. Caleb built a proper barn. The house gained a second room, then a third. Mara grew strong in ways that went beyond muscle. She spoke with confidence now, made decisions without second-guessing, and held her head up when they went to town. She was building more than a ranch, she was building herself into someone whole. Caleb changed too. He talked more, planned further ahead than the next season. He started thinking in terms of years instead of days. When Mara told him she was pregnant one spring morning, he didn't respond with words at first. He just pulled her close and held her, nodding against her hair as if accepting something he'd hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. The birth came hard in the winter. A midwife from town stayed for 2 days, then left them with a healthy baby boy and instructions. The house filled with new sounds, crying, cooing, laughter that echoed off walls that had known only work and quiet. Caleb built a cradle from leftover pine, sanding it smooth so no splinter could harm small skin. Mara named the child Samuel. The land flourished. So did they. What Mara had wanted, family, chosen freely and built through staying, had come to pass. Not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the quiet accumulation of days where they chose each other. Through work. Through trust. Through the simple, profound decision to belong to one another. On the porch at sunset, with Samuel asleep in Mara's arms and the ranch spreading out before them, Caleb finally understood what he'd been missing all those years alone. He'd found home. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold tales from the Wild West. Share this with someone who believes in second chances and the power of chosen family. Drop a comment below. What moment resonated with you the most? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.